Hi, welcome back to We All Scream, another true crime podcast. I'm your host, Lisa, and today we're covering the story of Michelle Neurauter. Now, we'll give you a warning, a trigger warning. This does involve talk of suicide. Our sources for today's episode are 48 Hours, Democrat and Chronicles, Star Gazette, and the Central New Jersey Home News. It was 1989 when Michelle and Lloyd met while attending high school together. Michelle invited Lloyd to her graduation celebration, and a whirlwind romance developed. The couple married on December 7th of 1991, becoming Mr. and Mrs. Neurauter. They both attended community college before adding 3 daughters to their family. Lloyd landed a job at Corning Glass in Corning, New York as an engineer. Corning is a small town in Steuben County, and it seemed like a great community for Michelle and Lloyd to raise their family. Michelle homeschooled the girls for a while. Friends said she wanted the girls to take education seriously and encouraged them to read often and to use proper grammar. Lloyd was seen by friends and family as an attentive and caring father who was very involved in the girls' lives. He regularly took them to their ballet classes and even learned to do their hair. Home videos show a content couple raising happy children. But when the camera wasn't filming, he was said to have an out of the box and cruel way of disciplining them, even for the smallest things. A friend of middle daughter, Carrie, described Lloyd as strict and overbearing. She once witnessed Lloyd yell, "Carrie, front and center." Then Carrie would march to her father, drop to her knees in front of him, and was visibly shaking in fear. She said Lloyd would sometimes slap his daughters in the face if he felt it was a just punishment for whatever they had done to upset him, and he would often cut down Michelle in the most condescending way with a smile on his face. In late November of 2007, Michelle all of a sudden stopped communicating with her parents and extended family. Later, she would tell a friend Lloyd had made her because he didn't want her to have anywhere to go if she decided to leave him. In 2008, Lloyd took a new job in New Jersey, leaving his family behind in Corning. Friends of Michelle said she seemed like an entirely different person once he was gone. She could finally be herself and enjoy raising her girls. In 2013, Lloyd filed for divorce. Michelle was able to find a job at a local college as an English professor, and she and the girls moved into a more affordable home, still staying in the city of Corning. When Lloyd was ordered to pay Michelle child support and maintenance, he all of a sudden wanted sole custody of the kids. But when that didn't go as planned, he used the legal system to harass Michelle. Her lawyer said there were 26 separate sets of filings after the divorce was final, which is a highly unusual amount. And the lawyer stated, like, even 2 or 3 filings after a divorce would be considered a lot. Nye Ryder would become a household name to local lawyers and courthouse employees because there was just so much back and forth between the two. Lloyd would make false claims about Michelle in an attempt to get out of paying child support, and Michelle would accuse Lloyd of trying to turn the kids against her. Their oldest daughter would eventually move in with Lloyd, and Carrie went off to college at RIT to start earning her major in computer engineering technology. Still, Lloyd was ordered to pay nearly $6,000 in child support and maintenance a month to Michelle, so he continued to fight to gain sole custody of their youngest daughter, who was only 14 years old, to try to get out of that payment. But something odd happened on Friday, August 25th of 2017. To Michelle's surprise, Lloyd didn't show up to his petition of sole custody hearing, and the case was dismissed. While Lloyd had never missed a hearing before, and Michelle didn't understand it, she couldn't help but feel relieved and excited. She even invited some of her friends and their kids to join her and her youngest daughter on Saturday morning to go icing. And this is something I have never heard of, but I guess you get a big block of ice and you literally slide down a hill on it. Sounds like a fun time. Sounds like a fun time. A picture a friend took shows Michelle happily taking a photo of the kids icing down the hill. Everyone had a blast. 2 days later, on Monday, August 28th, 2017, a family friend came to Michelle's house to pick up her youngest daughter to take her to swim practice. But when he arrived, he ended up calling 911, telling the dispatcher there was something strange going on inside of the house. Sergeant McDivitt was the first officer to respond to the scene. The front door of the house had a few panes of clear glass, which allowed him to see a motionless woman laying at the bottom of the steps. He then opened the unlocked door, as danger of life is considered an exigent circumstance, allowing him to enter the home without a search warrant. And when he assessed Michelle, she had no pulse, she was cold to the touch, and had a rope around her neck. It seemed Michelle had committed suicide by hanging. Friends and family didn't believe it, though. She was probably the happiest she had been in a long time after Lloyd didn't show up to that custody hearing, causing the case to be dismissed, and everything else in her life was headed in a positive direction as well. To those close to her, suicide seemed like it would be the last thing on her mind. Police Chief Jeff Spaulding agreed after noticing an abrasion on Michelle's chin that he deemed unsettling. He stated it looked as if someone had put a rope over her head from behind and pulled. But where was the youngest daughter? Investigators quickly moved their concern to the now missing 14-year-old who was nowhere to be found after a thorough search of the house. And they checked the basement, the attic, the garage, anywhere they can think of. She was nowhere to be found. And it's unclear whether an Amber Alert was issued for the 14-year-old, but later in the day, Carrie called police from her apartment in Rochester, 100 miles away from the gruesome scene, and told a lieutenant a friend had informed her about the suicide. To everyone's relief, she also told him her 14-year-old sister was safe and sound with her in her apartment. Carrie went on to tell the lieutenant how her sister ended up with her in Rochester. She said after she was done moving into her college apartment, she drove home Saturday night to spend one last night in her bedroom. When she arrived home, she claimed Michelle started freaking out and accusing her of taking her father's side in the family's court battle. Carrie said her sister woke up because of Michelle's yelling and was scared. She decided to leave and was concerned about her leaving her sister there, so she took her to Rochester with her. But Carrie's story didn't make sense. Why would her mother be upset about court issues when the case had just been dismissed? She had a great job, still had custody of her youngest child, and was by all means successful in life. Police patiently waited for Michelle's autopsy results and thought for sure the medical examiner's finding would be black or white, determining either a homicide or a suicide. So when the manner of death came back undetermined, they were shocked. Michelle's family suspected Lloyd had something to do with her death, but he seemed to have a solid alibi. He was 2,500 miles away in California for a job interview when Michelle's body was found. But after police talked to Carrie again, they found out Lloyd had helped her move into her apartment in Rochester on Saturday, which put him just an hour and a half drive away from Michelle's home. She said her dad stayed the night at a hotel in Rochester Saturday night and caught a plane to California early the next morning. Lloyd was still in California when he heard the news of Michelle's death. He flew to Corning, and one of the first things he did upon returning was pay a visit to the Steuben County Courthouse to cancel his child support and maintenance payments to Michelle. In an interview, Lloyd told investigators he checked into a hotel in Rochester on Saturday. Carrie then came to visit him at the hotel, and after a while, he walked her out to her car, invited her to come back in the morning for breakfast, and then went back to his hotel room where he stayed the rest of the night. When Carrie met him for breakfast the next morning, she had her younger sister with her. Cell phone records put Lloyd at the hotel all of Saturday night, as he stated. And surveillance videos show Lloyd checking into the hotel Saturday afternoon, and then Carrie coming into the hotel to visit him that evening. Lloyd walking her back to her car that night. But this is where the story doesn't line up with the surveillance videos because they show him getting into Carrie's car with her and driving off, and he doesn't come back that night. At 6:30 a.m. on Sunday, he can be seen walking across the hotel parking lot to his car, and he's not coming from the direction of the hotel. It's like he was dropped off nearby and he's wearing the same clothes he had on the previous day. With police discrediting his alibi, it didn't take long for them to find a motive: money. Lloyd was over $100,000 in credit card debt and was paying Michelle nearly $6,000 a month. He tried to cash out Michelle's $260,000 life insurance policy as well. Police suspected Carrie was covering for her father. So in the fall of 2017, investigators tapped Lloyd and Carrie's cell phones. It had been about 2 months since Michelle's death, and the conversation between the two weren't raising any suspicions. So the investigators kind of wanted to hurry it up and did what is known as tickling the wire. So to do this, an investigator called Carrie and asked her to come in to answer some more questions, and she agreed to meet with them. And it worked because as soon as she hung up with the investigator, she called her father. So Lloyd tells her not to meet with them and to lie about having a counseling appointment because this whole thing has just been so hard on her. And then he laughs and asks her if she thinks she can cry when she's telling the investigator this. And she says she might be able to. Lloyd tells Carrie it'd be nice if this were just all over, and she says that, yeah, it would just be a dream. And then he tells her, if it was that serious, the police would have probably already had people after you. And then he laughs again, and their conversation ends. While their conversation made investigators suspicious, they couldn't move forward with the investigation due to the autopsy report stating the manner of Michelle's death was undetermined. And they couldn't exhume Michelle's body for a second autopsy because Lloyd conveniently chose to have her cremated. So the district attorney did the next best thing. He asked a private forensic pathologist to sit down with them and have a look at all the photos and findings of Michelle's autopsy. The pathologist looked closely at the postmortem photos, paying particular attention to the rope marks on Michelle's chin and the hemorrhaging in her eyes. Then went through all the paperwork and came to the conclusion that she had been strangled to death and ruled the manner of death a homicide. So on January 24th of 2018, 5 months after Michelle's death, two investigators surprised Lloyd at his office in New Jersey and gave Lloyd the news Michelle's death had been ruled a homicide. He played it cool and even agreed to head to the local police station to take a polygraph. The same day, Carrie was visited by a couple of state troopers at her internship in Syracuse, New York. She immediately cracked, telling the investigators her father came to her a week before the murder and gave her an ultimatum, telling her he couldn't afford to pay her mother, so either he would have to commit suicide or he could kill her mom and make it look like a suicide. But he left the choice up to Carrie. During the years of custody battles, Michelle had accused Lloyd in court documents of using parental alienation. Parental alienation is a strategy where one parent intentionally displays to the child unjustified negativity aimed at the other parent. The purpose is to damage the child's relationship and to turn the child's emotion against the other parent. Michelle wasn't the only one who felt this is what Lloyd was doing. The district attorney of the case believed Carrie had been brainwashed by Lloyd, causing Carrie to devalue her mother as a person. 2 years before Michelle's death, she was backing her car out of the driveway while Carrie was standing outside of the car bickering with her. Carrie tried to block Michelle's car from leaving the driveway. And when Carrie told her dad about the incident, he was able to convince Carrie her own mom had tried to run her over. Carrie even called the police and attempted to file charges, but they didn't stick. The district attorney believed Carrie felt like she had no choice but to choose her father over her mother when Lloyd presented the ultimatum to her. Carrie told investigators her dad took the trip with her to her mom's on that fateful Saturday night, and she helped them get into the house. Michelle was at the top of the stairs when she saw Lloyd enter her house, and he went upstairs and they started arguing in Michelle's bedroom. Carrie said the plan was for Lloyd to put a towel in Michelle's mouth to keep her quiet and then put a rope around her neck and strangle her. Carrie said she stayed downstairs watching over her sister who was sleeping, but the yelling woke up her sister, so she took her out to her car, leaving her there, and then went back inside the house. Her mother eventually stopped yelling and the house went quiet. She went into her mother's bedroom and saw her mom on the floor and knew she was no longer alive. Lloyd then went out the back door, creeped through the side yard, climbed into the open rear hatch of Carrie's car, and they all drove to Rochester. The younger sister was completely unaware of what had transpired inside of the house and had no idea her father was hiding in the back of the car during the trip to Carrie's apartment. Lloyd never showed up for the polygraph test, but the police still had his phone tapped and were able to locate him in downtown Princeton on the fifth level of a parking garage. When police confronted him, he hopped up onto the rail and threatened to jump. The standoff went on for 2 hours, and Lloyd finally stepped down from the rail. And when he turned his back to an officer, the guy took off running towards Lloyd and tackled him to the ground. Like, this guy had to play football. The clip can be found online. It's amazing. Lloyd was finally in police custody and was charged with first-degree murder. Carrie was charged with second-degree murder for helping her father into the house. The district attorney offered Carrie 15 years to life for her cooperation, but tells her she'll face 25 to life if she isn't truthful during the trial. And after 2 weeks, Carrie decided she would testify against her father, and she pled guilty. During another interview with investigators, she had more to tell. After she saw her mom on the floor, her dad said he needed help lifting her. So her role was actually bigger than she had originally let on. She and her dad dragged her mother's body around the corner, and Lloyd tied the rope to a prong of the banister. Then they both lifted her up and over the side of the banister, making it look as if she had hanged herself. The district attorney believed Lloyd had used Carrie as his pawn, but the evidence so far was circumstantial. All they had was Carrie's word, and the jury might not believe her. They needed physical evidence, so he took Michelle's clothing that she was wearing the night of the murder and had them tested for touch DNA, which only requires a very small sample, such as skin cells, left on an object. Their hopes came true as they were about to find Lloyd's DNA on Michelle's clothing. When prosecutors made Lloyd aware of their findings, they made him an offer they expected him to shoot down. If he came clean and pleaded guilty as charged, they would recommend 25 years to life with the possibility of life without parole. 2 weeks before his trial, he decided to take the plea deal. Lloyd had a difficult time taking responsibility for Michelle's murder when it came time for him to admit what happened that night. He told the judge he had killed Michelle because she thought she would hurt the children because she was just so unstable and needed to be committed to a mental institution. But then went on to say that part doesn't matter because murder is wrong and it's no excuse. He told the judge he felt remorseful and that he had found God. He did fulfill his end of the plea deal by admitting he planned the murder, carried it out, and manipulated his daughter into helping him. He also admitted he asked his sister to try to persuade Carrie to change her testimony to benefit his defense. In December of 2018, Lloyd was sentenced to life without parole. Michelle's mother, Jeannie, who was Carrie's grandmother, wrote the judge a letter stating she believes Carrie needs psychiatric help and a lot of therapy, but she doesn't belong in prison and she believes Michelle would want her daughter to eventually lead a happy life. The district attorney, Brooks Baker, agreed and allowed her to plead guilty on a lesser charge of second-degree manslaughter. Carrie was sentenced to serve 1 to 3 years in a state prison in December of 2018. On January 16, 2020, at the age of 22, Carrie was released under a 1-year term of parole. Well, that's the story today. I really hope Carrie has been able to turn her life around and not let people talk her into absolutely terrible acts. Goes to show you really can trust no one. Thanks for tuning in today. Please like, subscribe wherever you're watching or listening. I'm should be on all the podcast channels where you would listen to a podcast. Obviously, YouTube. I also have an Instagram account as well as TikTok. I haven't been super active on there, but I plan to. Yeah, just trying to balance this with my full-time job and being a mom of 5 kids. So, you guys take care, have a great week, and remember to trust no one. Bye.